Hi, this is Ann Holmes with a quick tip for a holiday project. This is Halloween. This is the end of October, and it's scary how fast the holidays come around every year. It's when you're getting older, it seems like time just whips around. But I'm between projects now. We just finished Happy in the Mountains, and now I'm going to show you that I do some traditional sewing sometimes. I go to a quilting bee, and I've used my stash up to make a couple quilt tops, and I'm going to use fleece blankets for the back. I guess you can't really say that it's a quilt because a quilt has 3 layers, but this replaces the batting and the backing, and it's a nice soft quilt. But today I'm going to show you how we're going to make a holiday blanket out of a fleece top by flipping and sewing. We're going to sew our strips together, and then we're going to do a flip and sew technique. So this will be very fast for a holiday blanket. The blankets come about 50 inches by 60 inches, and they usually have some kind of binding on the end, but we're just going to disregard that binding until the very end, and that will get trimmed off. But you can find these blankets in a discount store. Sometimes the CVS pharmacy will have them, or anywhere from $2.50 to $6 for a 50 by 60 inch blanket, and they really are nice and soft. I do pre-wash them to take off some of the fuzz. For our holiday project, our quick project that we're going to flip and sew our strips onto a fleece back, I use a holiday assortment of reds and greens and a fun novelty fabric. But you could use this project for these pre-cuts. You could use a light one and a dark one to make this, and you could put your squares, a contrasting square, you could make them all the same color, and cut the squares 4.5 inches. But for our project, I played with my assortment to get an arrangement the way I like, and then I numbered the top of each strip. We have 11 double strips, so there's 22 2.5 inch strips, or like some of these I went ahead and because I didn't want to cut this novelty fabric up, I left it the 4.5 inches wide. So you can do any combination of strips that you like. And once you have an arrangement that you like, if you want it to go a certain way, it's helpful to just take like painter's tape and put a number at the top of each strip. And I marked my center strip. My center strip is number 6. And this is where I'm going to start doing my flipping and sewing. Okay. Our fleece blanket is approximately 50 inches wide by 60 long. And to find the center, I'm just folding this in half lengthwise and then putting a large pin in the center. We're going to start our flipping and sewing from our center strip. All right, now we fold it in half and have our pins at the top and the bottom. And we're going to use our center strip and just put that there and down to here. See, that's 60 inches is just about, so we want to make sure this is straight from one point to another. And we're going to just pin right in the middle of this strip. There were 11 double strips, and we've put our center strip, which is number 6, down. And now I'm going to we're going to leave those pins in the middle. We're going to put right sides together, and we're going to stitch 1/4 inch down this seam. All right, now we have our walking foot on, and what makes this walk or hop along is this prong that fits over this needle. It's the thing, the screw that holds the needle in place. That makes it hop along instead of dragging, because this is a stretchy material. And so use your walking foot, and we're going to be trimming all of this fleece binding off of here after we have our strips sewn together. So I'm using 1/4 of an inch. There's a mark on my walking foot at the 1/4 of an inch space. All right, so this is our first strip that we sew to the center. We just fold this out, and then I like to press that seam allowance. And now the next strip, we want to make sure that we line up these squares. So we're going to use, I have all these big quilting squares. So when we put that on, we can position it just like that. But let me finish giving this a pressing. So if you don't want to use that square, another good way to line up these blocks is just try to make a straight line with these gold blocks going through here. So we're just putting right sides together again, and we'll stitch this down. We're going to stitch all of the strips on one side of this quilt first, then we'll reverse it and start sewing from that edge. Right now we're sewing from the top and down, and later we'll be stitching from the bottom up to keep the quilt going straight rather than skewing it one way or the other. All right, you can see that we have the first half of our quilt sewn down. We kept sewing this down from the top to the bottom. Now when we do the second half, we still have our numbers at the top, but when we sew it, I'm taking it to the machine and starting to sew from the bottom to the top. The numbers, if you have your a particular design that you're planning like I am, that's why I numbered the top to keep everything in order the way I want it. If you just have random strips with blocks in it, it doesn't matter. But it would help to sew one side from the top down and the other side from the bottom to the top. I wanted to show you how irregular these fleece blankets are. We flip and sew the strips down, first one side, and then reverse the process and do it on the other side so that you're not skewing the quilt. But the fleece blankets themselves are irregular. But now we're going to take a big square and square it up. We have all these straight lines, so we can use one of those to square it up here. Center it there on the lines. I'm just shooting a line, following one of my lines and moving it up a little bit so that I'm going to clear everything, and we're just going to trim all of that off. Our quilts always look better once they're trimmed up and squared. What I did with this is, you know, I flipped and sewed the strips, but then to have a little stitching in the middle, I did do a top stitching in the ditch across the quilt top, just to anchor it down a few places. And this is what the back of the quilt looks like then. It's just kind of a simple grid pattern. The fleece is a little stretchy, so be sure and use your walking foot. And make sure when you're trimming it off that you get all of the binding that was attached to your fleece blanket. And then I wanted to give you a little tip. I love my big ruler here, but it is one of those rulers with the extra ½ an inch added to it. So when I was trying to square this up, from this line right there, I made it 12 inches to the end. And so I had to make sure that I had this positioned correctly so that I was doing a sure 12 inches and not 12 and a half, because these rulers are confusing sometimes because they have an extra ½ inch added on just two sides. After squaring it up, now I'm ready to add my binding, and I used my two golds to alternately make strips. And with my alternating strips, I decided I don't want to have the same colors next to each other, so I'm going to just start down here. When you do binding, you always leave at least 8 inches or more for joining the quilt. So I'm going to start like right there, position that there, and then to keep my binding from getting all tangled up, I empty a trash can and put this in here like that so it'll roll out and stay in one place. All right, this is our finished quilt top. I haven't turned back the binding yet. I like to sit down with friends or a television show and turn the binding back by hand, but you could do it quicker by machine for your quick holiday project. So I hope you enjoyed this, and happy holidays.